All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Raven Fit Talks. My name is DJ. I'll be your host again, and this is going to be episode 2. We are going over the Book of Five Rings, chapter number 2, the chapter titled Water. Now, if you guys saw my presentation from last week, which was going over the Earth chapter of Miyamoto Musashi's Immortal Masculine Wisdom, the Book of Five Rings, we're going to go and continue on the exact same vein and talk about his second chapter. Now, in the very first chapter, you guys got a chance to get a glimpse into his philosophies, understanding where Musashi comes from. Why should I even approach martial arts? What wisdom does that hold for me in my life? So we went over philosophies, went over an understanding of the approach of martial arts, how you can see it in everything you do. We went over the 4 occupations and how you can see it not just in actually fighting people, but also comporting yourself out there in the world for any profession you might have. If you guys have not seen it yet, make sure you guys check that out, but after this video. So for now, let's dive into the Book of Water. So in the Book of Water is chapter number 2. Musashi is going to be discussing what happens when you actually step in front of a foe. So this is no longer, hey, what's the philosophy? How should I approach martial arts? Now is I'm actually in the fight. I'm stepping in front of somebody. What should I do then? So in chapter number 2, we're going to go over the techniques that he discusses on how you can actually apply your sword, apply your feet, apply your body, and how that relates to real life. And I think what's really amazing about this is even though I'm going to explain it in terms of how to use the sword, this is also universally applicable to not just how a man should walk around in everyday life, and I'll make a connection to that, but as well as if you're fighting somebody and you don't have a sword in your hand, the principles still hold true. Just as much as if you were an athlete and you're going to play a sport, how can I invoke intimidation in the other person? How should I move myself? I think you guys are going to be absolutely surprised and amazed at how much of these concepts from Musashi integrate into every sort of athletic endeavor. And that's one of the reasons why it means so much to me and near and dear to my heart, because this type of masculine wisdom has to get passed down through the ages because it's absolutely invaluable. So that being said, without further ado, let's dive into it. All right, so he starts off by saying, the heart of the two heaven style, which is his Denshichiro, takes water as its foundation and exercises the practice of advantage. Once again, guys, just like last time, the whole point of fighting isn't which technique is the best. How do I get the better of my foe in terms of how do I put my hand position? Where should I step? None of that matters. The whole point of his style is how do I get the advantage? How do I destroy him first? He says many places describe martial arts as a contest between two individuals, but it is essential to understand these principles to be a battle of opposing armies of 10,000 men as well, and that you see them in a large way. In other words, when you guys approach the idea of martial arts and you're going out in the world and you're going to be contending with people, you don't have to just think one-on-one. You can think one to many. And in thinking one-to-one and one-to-many, it keeps your mind from becoming narrow-minded. You can now see the world for what it is and try to apply these principles broadly. And he'll tell you more about that. He says you should consider these principles as though they were discovered from your own mind and continually make great efforts to make them a physical part of yourself. And that's really amazing, guys. He doesn't want you to just read his words. He wants you to embody them. He wants you to take what he's saying as absolute truth to say, imagine these actually came from you. And just think, anytime you guys have had an amazing idea about something in the world and actually comes from you intrinsically, there's a sense of pride you have in it, and you're going to follow it because it's true to your heart. He's telling you, look, I did all the legwork. I killed countless men in one-on-one duels, and I never lost. I'm essentially the greatest of all time. I'm letting you know these principles absolutely work, and they absolutely apply to you in your life in any sort of martial endeavor. For that reason, take it to heart. Act as if these thoughts and these concepts were discovered from your own mind. And then make great efforts to make them a physical part of yourself. So manifest it not just mentally, physically. Put it into practice. Okay, so now we step into the very first concept of chapter 2, which is the frame of mind. And once again, guys, all the artistry is beautifully hand-drawn and hand-painted by the legendary Takehiko Inoue of Japan, who did famous mangas like Slam Dunk, Vagabond, which is what you guys see right here. And this picture is beautiful because frame of mind is how you guys view the world. And I want you guys to imagine a man who walked around being invincible, the guy who was essentially invincible under the sun, a guy who never lost, but this is also never lost in the arena of life. So this isn't merely, oh, a guy in the ring never lost and he gets to relax outside. No, not at all. He could easily be ambushed by people. And he was very notorious and very infamous for avoiding taking showers, keeping himself looking scraggly. Why? Because he felt if he ever relaxed, some nobody who was trying to make a name for himself could easily jump him inside of a bathhouse and take his head and claim his fame. So for him, this is a man who had to live on edge, right? We're talking the 1600s. This guy had to be 100% dialed in. So when it comes to frame of mind, he's going to tell you something very, very serious. And I think what's great about this is he's going to be preaching authenticity to all you guys out there. It is absolutely mandatory that you maintain who you are at all times. You might think, DJ, what do you mean by that? Well, what I mean is you need to be who you say you are, not just a persona that you turn on when you feel like it. You're not out here to perform for people. You're here to be yourself. So in the quest for authenticity, wouldn't you actually be the same person no matter where you went and at all times? That's where he's coming from. He says, in the way of the martial arts, do not let your frame of mind be any different from your everyday mind. In both everyday and military events, essentially fights, your mind should not change in the least, but should be broad and straightforward, neither drawn too tight nor allowed to slacken even a little. So what is he saying here? He's saying that when you guys go through the world, you should not have your mind preoccupied with this or that, because the more going on in here, the less you're seeing out in front of you. So for a man like him, who needs to be able to see everything around him and observe all the events and be extremely perspicacious about his environment, he says, you know what? Instead of having to reverse the blood flow one day and get yourself into the point where you're like, okay, well, a car ran in front, or a car drove in front of me and I had to jump back and it startled me and I screamed and I yelled. Why? Because I wasn't thinking a car was going to be there. He thinks that's dumb. You should always assume that might happen. And if your mind is focused on your environment and what's going on around you, you'll never feel like your mind is bound too tight. And it also won't be slacking and relaxed. So you're not on your phone when you guys are walking around. Your mind should always be focusing on your environment. That is something that men have had to do since the beginning of time. They've had to watch where they step and also be cognizant that there's no danger for anyone else to protecting. Wife, children, community, friends, comrades, doesn't matter. A man always had to pay attention. He says, keep the mind in the exact center, not allowing it to become sidetracked. Let it sway peacefully, not allowing it to stop doing so for even a moment. As in, your mind needs to continue moving. And this is very much a Zen Buddhist principle. And, you know, Musashi was famously, you can argue trained, you can say coached, or you can say consulted by the famous Buddhist monk Takuan Soho. And he speaks a lot about keeping your mind fluid at all times, because once your mind stops at something, you can't see anything else. Like if I'm walking down the street and I focus on the car going across, then I don't see the guy walking behind me. I don't see the pothole in the road that can twist my ankle and break my leg. So the idea is, if you're not stopping at any one point when you are moving through, you'll see everything for what it is. And I think the easiest way to equate this to real life is, if any of you guys play sports, being in the zone, right? Now, if you guys have had the pleasure of getting into a flow state like the zone, which I've gone into multiple times playing basketball when I was younger, even doing martial arts, the feeling you get, you're never focusing on just your opponent. Somehow, even when you're fighting the guy or sparring, you also notice the crowd. You notice how sticky the floor might be. You notice how your clothes are feeling when you're moving around. You notice your breathing. And you notice everything without focusing on a single one item. It's just your mind expands. It's very, very broad, and you notice all of it. And that's what he's saying. Carry that same mindset out into everyday life. He says, do not let your mind stand still when you are in repose, but do not let it speed up when you are involved in quick actions, as in when you're in repose, when you guys are relaxed. Don't let your mind stand still. Keep it moving. Even when you are speeding up to actually do something, whether it be combat, athletics, or sports, your mind should not also speed up with it. It should stay in the center. The mind should not be distracted by the body, nor the body distracted by the mind. Because the more that you guys are thinking about yourselves, the less you're thinking about the environment around you. And there's very, very utility. There's very, very little utility in a man focusing on himself, how he appears. Oh, did I dress really well? Oh, when I'm walking down the street, do I look nervous when I'm walking? There's very little utility to that. The strongest men are the men who don't really care that much about how they're coming off in that instance. You know, you guys are supposed to prepare yourselves when you guys are at home, get yourselves into good shape, always look a good part. But once you put yourself together, when you're out in the real world and you have actual unforeseen, uncertain consequences that could happen to you, your mind is off of yourself and your mind is on the environment. It's on everything around you. He says, though your mind appears weak on the surface, it should be strong at the bottom. That's because you'll have the mind of someone who looks like they're not doing much at all. You're just walking. So you shouldn't see someone who's like walking around trying to look tough. Those guys usually aren't very tough at all. But the guys who are very calm demeanor, who speak calmly, who seem like they're really doing nothing, those are the minds that are very strong at the bottom, just waiting. Act so that your opponent cannot understand your mind, because they won't. Now, the man whose body is small should bear everything in mind about the man whose body is large, and vice versa. Now, I think this is great for all my my short brethren out there. When you guys are going through the world, it doesn't matter if you're short. You can be like Vegeta. Vegeta was shorter than everyone in the canon of DBZ, and he still murked everybody. Okay, so your height, yes, in your mind and to other people's minds can play an advantage, but we've all seen how a shorter adversary can absolutely stoke in fear into people who are way larger than them and much more domineering. Think Mike Tyson. He's a perfect example, right? He would get into a ring and he was shorter than most of the people he went against. I mean, maybe even every single one back during his heyday. And everyone was scared to death because of what he brought, his mindset. People knew that in that calm face coming out without the flashy stuff, the black hoodie, black trunks, no specific designs, no tassels on his boots, and he would just come out just ready to fight. Everyone was scared of that. So if you are a smaller person, you must bear everything in your mind about the guy who is bigger, because your mindset will also be seen by the world. Do not let the mind become clouded inside. Keep it broad and place your wisdom in that broad place. Sharpen your wisdom, distinguish principle and its opposite in the world, learn the good and the bad of all things, experience all of the arts and accomplishments and their various ways, and act in the way so that you will not be taken in by anyone. In other words, in order to understand the world, you have to see the world. You have to accept the world for what it is. If you go through life saying, oh, this will never happen to me, guess what? You are now unprepared. If you go through the world saying, oh, I don't really understand how that works, but I choose not to investigate it, you will not be prepared. See all things, understand all things. That way you can recognize and you can assess all things. This is the heart of wisdom of the martial arts. So it's a beautiful way to start off this chapter. Okay, so he gets into a couple of my favorite topics. This one I think is, guys, I want you to understand, this is one of the most important concepts that any of you guys can take in terms of masculine wisdom that you can take with you. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if you're going in for a board meeting. It doesn't matter if you're trying to command respect out of a room. It doesn't matter if you're speaking to somebody one-on-one, if you're in some sort of fight, if you're in a sporting event. You guys are going to realize, you guys are going to hear that the way a man should hold himself is the exact same in every freaking arena. And I'm going to make a lot of correlations, but let's dive into it. So in body posture, your face is neither turned down, nor turned up, nor turned to the side, nor distorted. Okay, so what is he saying? Keep your face forward. Your eyes are not confused, and your brow is not knit. Narrow the space between your eyebrows, and do not move the eyeballs at all. So what is he saying? When you're looking confused with this kind of look, you seem like you don't know what you're doing. If your eyebrow is knit this way, it seems like something's preoccupying your mind. You want to narrow the space in between your eyebrows, but then don't move your eyeballs at all. Just here. Just subtle. Just looking forward. Now, if anybody ever plays sports out there, let's say you're fighting somebody, right? Well, in a fight, if I'm fighting someone, I'm gonna look at one of two places, either their clavicle, their collarbone, or directly at the chest. That's it. That's where my eyes go, because from that point, peripherally, I can see the rest of his body moving. And anyone who plays sports knows exactly what I'm talking about. Now, let's say you're playing something like basketball. If I'm playing basketball against somebody and I'm defending him, this guy's got the basketball in his hand, I'm not watching the ball. If I watch the ball, I'm going to get psyched out. I'm staring at his chest. And in seeing his chest, I can see everything he does with his hands. I can see how he's moving the ball. And I can know whether or not he's trying to fake me out or if he's actually moving to that spot. The guys who get faked out the most, especially like the newbies you guys see get owned on social media, or, oh, this dude broke his ankles. The doctor or the professor broke his ankles. Yes, because the guy's watching the ball. He's an idiot. But anyone who watches the chest, they don't move at all. And all the greatest defenders in the world watch the chest. So once again, once you fix your eyes on the place, you allow the rest of it to expand around you. And now your eyeballs do not need to move at all. Same exact thing in fighting. With your face tranquil and the line of your nose straight, you should have a slight sensation of sticking your chin out. Okay, so face tranquil, nose is straight, right? We're not trying to curve it to the side. You should have a slight sensation of sticking your chin out. So what does that mean? Does it mean this? No, not chin forward, chin out like this. If it's slightly in front of you. So what does that look like? It looks like I'm trying to appear taller, right? It's like all of us who played, football or anything back when we were kids, we're trying to be like that really cool pose. We're like, yeah, man, showing off my neck like I'm a gangster or a G. Well, that's also a way of saying, hey, look, I'm stronger than you. You know why? Because I'm showing you that I'm willing to expose vital areas of my body and vital regions because I'm so confident that you can't harm me. That's why we see it as strong. So when a guy's standing there with his arms all crossed up and he's looking like this, he seems what? He seems guarded. He seems weak, unsure of himself, trying to protect his vital organs. But when you go against a guy and he's standing up like this, and looking down at you. The reason why we understand that biologically, and this is a biological understanding, guys. This is something you have to be taught. We know this innately. We understand the pecking order in our actual biology. You'll see a man do that, and you'll notice that that is a strong man. And that's what he's telling you. The line of the back of your neck should also be straight. So once again, straight up. So he's saying, even when you're fighting somebody with swords, fighting to the death, there's no better posture than a posture of a man who looks very, very confident. There's no reason to hunker over. And I think that's a real big deal too. You guys might watch animes or watch martial arts movies where the guy's like always in a crouch and he's like, trying to fight these people. Well, he's making himself small and weak. And unfortunately, a lot of guys who do draw those animes have no idea, no concept of fighting. They've never fought before. A lot of guys are, pencil neck geeks who like to draw. And mind you, I'm only saying that because I was that guy. I grew up wanting to work for Disney. All I did was draw all day long. I was also a pencil neck geek. I didn't know the first thing about things, but I did study martial arts as well. So as I was doing it, I'm like, wait a second. That's not how somebody moves. That wouldn't actually happen in a fight. Last time I did that, some dude punched me right in my face. Or this dude knocked me out. This dude choked me out. That doesn't work. So I had something to bounce off of, but most guys don't. So when you guys are trying to imagine in your mind, how should I look? Should I be the guy who's kind of hunched over, look dark and mysterious? Not at all. The guy who lived, the greatest warrior of all time in Japan, is telling you, stand up tall. You should probably stand up tall. So he says, drop both shoulders. Keep your back straight. Do not stick out your rear or your ass, and put strength from your knees to the front of your feet. As in, like, don't stick out your butt and have yourself hunkered over. That's literally what he's saying to you. Don't do it. Stand up tall. Extend your stomach so that your hips will not be bent. Once again, he's just like hammering it home, guys. Extend your stomach. So how do I contract my stomach? When I bring it down to flex, which makes me seem weak. Extend means, boom, hips not bent, which means hips are straight. Neutral spine. So what he's literally saying is you guys should be like this at all times. If you're fighting someone, you should stay just like this. In all things concerning the body in the martial arts, make the everyday body for martial arts. Make the everyday body the body for the martial arts, and the body for the martial arts, the everyday body. This is essential and should be examined thoroughly. I love this because this is absolutely integral to all of us. All of us guys can learn from this. You should never be walking around looking like life's defeating you. You should never be walking around looking like you just got your ass whooped, or you woke up this morning, I'll have a bad day. I don't care. There is tremendous power in your posture. And there's been research and experiments done on this, guys. The research shows when you are having a bad day, if you have your shoulders back and your chest up and you walk around like this, you will instantly start feeling better about yourself. And then the exact opposite. If you walk around through life and you're hunched over like this, I don't care if you're having a good day, you'll start to hate yourself. You'll start to feel like, man, I'm not doing so well. You'll feel that way. Those feelings are real. So what he's saying is, if you're going to be fighting for your life and you want to be as strong as humanly possible, you know what makes you look strong. You know what makes you feel strong. Do that. Stop confusing it. Just keep it simple. All right, next concept, using the eyes. And using the eyes, do so in a large and encompassing way. There is observation, and then there is seeing. To know your opponent's sword, yet not to see it at all, is very important in the martial arts. I was just saying that a second ago, right? If I'm defending somebody who has a basketball and he's moving, I'm not watching the ball. I'm looking at him. Same thing here. When you're fighting someone, you're not looking at your opponent's sword. He's saying you find a center that you can stare at, which for him is definitely going to be the sternum right here, or the diaphragm, and you focus there. From there, you can see everything. It is essential that your eyes do not move and that you be able to see on both sides. That's your peripheral. Master the use of the eyes and do not change that under any circumstances. I think what's beautiful too in the actual manga Vagabond by Takehiko Inoue, he references this, and this is a part when Musashi is fighting against the legendary Shishido Baiken of the Chain and Sickle. And so during this time, Takehiko illustrates a time when Musashi is he's reminiscing and remembering words from Takuan Soho, which you see in the panel to the left, which is that the bald-ish monk, right? He tells him, preoccupied with a single leaf and you won't see the tree. And what they didn't show you was preoccupied with the single tree and you'll miss the entire forest. In other words, this was back before when he was teaching Musashi. You need to be able to look at one spot to see everything, but don't just focus on the one thing. And so in this one, he says, preoccupied with a single leaf, you won't see the tree, right, Takuan? And under he says, if I focus too much on the chain, the sickle will cut me down. And he says, the god of death is smacking his lips, as in one of us is going to die right now because I'm realizing how serious this is. And this is actually a panel right after Shishido Baiken breaks his nose by having the chain go just by his face, and the weight bam, snaps his nose. Guys, if you guys haven't read or seen this yet, make sure you guys read this manga. Favorite manga of all time, right next to DBZ. All right, use of the feet. So if anyone understands fighting in the least at all, they will all agree that your feet and your use of your feet and your ability to control the distance is the number one principle in fighting. Why? Because you can't hit what's not there. So if I can control the distance, I can get in and out without you hitting me, but I can hit you. You walk away unscathed, right? So that's always the ideal. Using the feet well. You should walk as usual, whether the case calls for large, small, quick, or slow strides. Interesting, right? You think to yourself, well, if I'm using the feet, shouldn't I do something kind of crazy? No. He said just walk as usual. He says feet that seem to fly, float, or be immobile are all three undesirable, as in don't try. You shouldn't try to be fast for the sake of being fast. Don't try to float for the sake of floating, because that's wasting energy and time is very, very precious. So when you are going against someone, get to the point. He says the way of the yin yang foot is essential and means never moving just one foot. What does he mean by that? Well, you step right and left, whether striking, pulling back, or parrying a blow. I repeat, you should never step with just one foot. Now, what's amazing about this is when I first started learning Western boxing, which is just boxing with just the hands, when you learn how to circle and move efficiently, your coach is going to say, you know what? If you're trying to move to the right, don't just step to the right with your right foot and then have your left foot catch up after the fact. That's too slow. You have 2 feet. Use them for a reason. So instead of my right foot stepping and then my left foot stepping, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift my right foot, push off with my left to gain the advantage and get there quicker. So now it's a push step as opposed to step, which is too slow. And if you guys ever watch any boxing and see someone with fantastic footwork, the way they're able to move, the reason why they can circle so quickly is because they're pushing off the foot to the rear, and the foot that is leading the direction is going to lift off and step. But it's a simultaneous motion. You're never moving one foot at a time. When you do, you get confused and you get slow. Okay. Here's another concept. Let's say using a samurai sword. Okay. If you're using katana or a kodachi. Cool. All right. So this right here. So let's assume you have a katana. Now, if I'm going to strike down with my right hand, this is one thing. Okay. That's one level of speed. This right here is also one level of speed with the opposite hand. If I have 2 hands on the same instrument here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to strike forward this way. At the same time, this hand here is going to pull down. So see how I can get speed off of pulling with the opposite hand and also have the strike here. So now when I go and I pull and strike, this is even faster than just this by itself or just this by itself. This right here is going to be the fastest. And that's the exact same concept. The idea is that you should be using both at the same time. It is very, very slow and is very inefficient and, as Bruce Lee would say, non-economical to move one limb at a time. Move them together. That way, in one way, you're also thinking, I'm moving my entire body at all times, and there is no separation. There is no, I move my hand and my feet. No, I move my body. And for that case, everyone's involved. Okay, it's a tremendously valuable concept that is an absolute must in any sort of fighting. Okay, next concept, wielding the sword. He says you should take up the sword with the idea of cutting your opponent down. Pretty straightforward. Knowing the way of the sword means that even when you handle with 2 fingers what I generally indicate as a sword, you understand what you are doing and can handle it freely. Okay, so this right here takes a little bit of context. I didn't want to go into the harsh details and the nitty gritty of exactly how to hold a sword, because for a lot of you guys will never lift a sword. And I think just translating the topics might be better for you guys. So to save you guys time and brevity, what he's saying is when you guys are manipulating your sword, it should be held tightly with the 2 bottom fingers, and the top 2 fingers are going to keep it open for maneuverability. Now, this was especially important for the katana versus like a normal like European broadsword, right? So European broadsword, it's more diamond shaped. It doesn't have a natural curve in it. So because it doesn't have the curve, guys will grip super tight here. And they're going to try to like almost weighing into like a metal bar, right? As opposed to the katana has the ability to cut very, very efficiently. It's an extremely well-crafted killing tool. So for that reason, keeping lightness here in the fingers allows for maneuverability and allows you to be much more finessing and actually get that cut. So if any of you guys have ever tried, cutting into something before with like maybe like a wooden bokken or just striking something, you realize that if you hold here and hit something, a lot of times that recoil goes right up your arm and it's going to be like a harsh cut. But if you can learn to cut this way, like you see a lot of samurai masters do, it's a much more fluid cut. It actually works in harmony with the blade and you get the result that you want. So what he's saying here is you can understand what you're doing and handle it free when you only use the 2 fingers essentially to maneuver it, and you're not trying to squeeze with a dead grip. He says, if you think you will handle it with speed as you would a fan or a dagger, you will not be in accord with the way of the sword, and it will be difficult to wield. In other words, the sword is a sword. Accept it for what it is. Don't try to use the sword like a dagger, just like you wouldn't swing a dagger like a sword. It's smaller, it's more agile, it's going to have a different way of movement. So in other words, when it's a sword, learn to swing the sword how a sword moves. Don't try to move the sword like a fan, or don't try to make it do something that it is not made for. Very simple. He says, using what is called a knife cut, you will be unable to cut a man down with that sword. If you have struck downward with your sword, raise it in a simple way. If you have swung it to the side, return it to the other side in a simple way. But in all cases, extend your elbow fully and swing with strength. This is the way of the sword. So what is he saying here? Don't try to be fast. When you try to be fast, oftentimes you will not be fast. You know, I think a really good concept. Imagine someone who's doing a 100-meter sprint, 100-meter dash for the Olympics. They've been training for a decade, maybe even 2 decades to get to that floor. They're already a well-oiled machine. They know what they should be doing. Your thoughts can't move quick enough to control your body at the speed that your body can do it, technically subconsciously, right? So think about this. If you told yourself, hey, I'm going to walk down the road, but I want you to go ahead and think and or verbalize each step before you make it. Okay, I'm going to lift my right knee, balance the weight on my left leg, keeping my chin forward, keep my balance up. As my right knee starts to lift more, I'm going to go ahead and kick out my right heel. You will never take a first step. It will take too long, right? In other words, you can't cognize faster than your body can move. So what he's saying here is when you raise your sword, when you strike your sword down, when you want to reset it, don't try to be fast to reset it. When you swing it down, just bring it back into place naturally. Okay. Same thing with punches. If I'm throwing a punch, I'm not trying to punch and swing back as hard, as quickly as possible. My idea is I'm going to throw the punch out there and it's going to fall and just retract naturally. Retract naturally. When you do things natural way, you won't be tense. Your mind won't stop at any one point trying to be quick, and you'll just be in the moment. Your mind never has to take over. Okay. And then he says, but in all cases, extend your elbow fully and swing with strength. Yeah, you need to, because if you guys are trying to, cut someone down and you're doing this with elbows kind of bent, you'll never get it done. You need to fully commit and drive through. Okay. Like in sports, if you're, playing basketball again, it's considered like your follow through, right? You get that gooseneck. It was in, you want to make a good shot. It's going to go up to the top and it's going to lock out, follow through. If I'm throwing baseball, as I go through, my arm's going to fully lock out as I swing it down, right? So the idea is you should fully commit to whatever you're doing and swing with strength. This is the way of the sword. All right. And next we have fighting stance. He says there are 5 fundamental stances and no more than this. So I'm not actually going to go over the stances with you guys this time. I purposely left it out because you guys aren't going to become swordsmen. So explaining every single stance doesn't really matter, but getting to the meat of his argument really does. So he's on to say, however, no stance means taking no stance at all. You might think, what does it mean by that? Well, he says at its heart, this is first taking up the sword and then cutting down your opponent, no matter what is done or how it happens. Dude, killer, dude. Killer. Doesn't mess around, does he? At its heart, what kind of stance should I have? It doesn't matter. Your job is to take up your sword, cut down the other dude. I don't care how it's done. Just get it done. There you go. There you go. I think what's really beautiful about this too is the wisdom behind this is knowing it doesn't matter if you're using a crane stance, a frog stance, a tiger stance. Yeah, that's all good and all for making fancy looking movements. But at the end of the day, it does not matter. It doesn't matter if you use jujitsu. It doesn't matter if you use Muay Thai, karate, any type of Kung Fu. It doesn't really matter what you use. The whole point is your job is to defeat the person standing in front of you. That's it. I don't care how you get there. It doesn't matter about this is better than this. This is better than this. Hey, these are the 5 stances. Fantastic. Which one should I use? Whatever one kills him. That's it. That's the only thing that matters. He says whether you parry, slap, strike, hold back, or touch your opponent's cutting sword, you must understand that all of these are opportunities to cut him down. He doubles down on it. So he doesn't care. Yeah, maybe you might parry a strike. Maybe you might get in kind of close, use the footwork. That's all good and dandy. But you got to understand, all these do is get you closer to cutting him down. Eyes on the prize. Focus on what you're trying to do. Don't get distracted by the nonsense. So he goes on to say, to think in your mind, I'll parry, or, now I'm going to slap, or I'll hit, or I'm going to hold, or I'm going to touch him. All of that will be insufficient for cutting him down. He triples down on it. Then he says it is essential to think that anything at all is an opportunity to cut him down. That's it, guys. That's it. And I think what's amazing about this is he's trying to get you guys to understand the mission is the point. The reason and the motivation to get there doesn't really freaking matter. All that matters is this person will be cut down. For that, you're not thinking, hey, it's my responsibility to further my bloodline by showing the Shotokan karate. Who cares? When you get into a fight with someone, it's you or him. So your mindset shouldn't be, I'm going to use my fancy outside sweeping block here. I'm going to block here. Who cares? If doing that doesn't get you closer to breaking him down, it does not matter. But the guy who goes into battle and all he's thinking about is, how can I destroy you? That's the real scary person. That's a true fighting stance. It's not nonsense. Okay. And so what I did here is I actually put forth some manga panels from Takehiko Inoue's Vagabond. All right. So what you guys see here is Denshichiro, who is the younger brother of Yoshioka Seijiro, battling Miyamoto Mushashi in the second duel of the Yoshioka clan. Now, if you guys want to know more about that, you guys can watch the first episode that I did on the Earth chapter. I'll talk more about it. But what you'll see here, and this is beautifully illustrated by Takehiko, is you're going to see a fight going on. And Denshichiro, the guy, is at the top panel. Okay, he's the one who's raising his sword and he's yelling his ki, right? And the bottom left panel, you see Musashi's calm face just looking forward. Now, what you guys are going to see in this event, just to have it make sense, is Musashi's narrating his thoughts as he's watching Denshichiro. So Denshichiro is thinking to himself, what's the best way and what's the best stance I can take to engage my foe? And all Musashi is thinking is, how can I kill him? So this is beautiful. So in this panel right here, you'll see Musashi at the top panel taking his first step forward. He says, I'll break the stillness. And then he imagines stepping to the right, stepping to the left, and cutting straight through Denshichiro. Swift cut, right? Neck spurting out with blood. It says, I should use my short sword. And as Musashi contemplates even more, he's like, no. I think either sword will do just fine, right? So whether I use my short or my long sword, I can still cut the right side of his neck in that stance that Denshichiro has. So at the top, Musashi just has a very blank stare. Eyeballs not moving. No expression on his face. Exactly how it's described in his book. Denshichiro, the top middle panel, is looking panicked, right? Top left panel, he says, why won't he draw? Well, what is he thinking? And then you see the middle side panel is Musashi's eye just staring right at him, looking through him. And the bottom right panel, you see Denshichiro looking even more worried. On the bottom left, you see a collection of Denshichiro's disciples, and they're all part of the Yoshioka clan. So they're commenting on the fight, and they're saying, ooh, the raised stance, his forte. He's talking about Denshichiro, who just recently brought his arms up this way. And so the guy says, your average opponent would quickly lose his will to fight after seeing that stance from that large build. The other guy says, yes, that's how well it works. Right? So confident that the stance is going to matter. And then, what happens? Denshichiro pulls his sword down and puts it behind him. And his disciples are confused. They're like, wait, what is he doing? And Musashi, as you can see, is standing there in front of him, arms down to either side, just looking forward. No movement whatsoever. So another disciple says, Denshichiro, he must have felt something and changed his stance. A stance that doesn't let one's opponent gauge the distance. Once again, so now Denshichiro has a sword behind him. Musashi staring at him. On the bottom right, Denshichiro is thinking, like, draw, come on, man, draw. And Musashi is just staring at him with a blank expression. On the left panel, he says, draw, Musashi, as he's sweating profusely. But the entire time, Musashi is just staring at him. And he's like, this is how I'd kill him. Maybe I'd swipe down and take his hand off. Or, and the crowd is getting restless at the bottom, like, hey, when is it going to start? When's this battle going to get going? And then Denshichiro on the top right, again, is like, draw. And Musashi's like, well, maybe I can just do it this way. What you guys are seeing is a stark contrast. Denshichiro trying to find the best fighting stance. And Musashi is just thinking, I would kill him this way. So one person is thinking, pretense. How do I get myself set up? The other person is like, how do I win? How can this fight be over instantly? Right? And then Musashi twitches his foot. And then Denshichiro brings his sword up all of a sudden. And then his disciples are even more worried. They're like, oh, he changed his stance again. What's going on? And then Shishido is sweating, breathing heavy, and Musashi is just staring right at him because his mindset is, how will I kill him? Not what's the best technique, what's the best movement pattern. He just wants to know, how can I get the job done? So he says, this is how I kill him, a slash across the face from the top down to the bottom right. And then as he's doing that, he's actually starting to walk closer toward Denshichiro. And he says, if I got this close, maybe this is how I kill him. I just go straight down the center. Musashi, once again, his eyes still staring menacingly, just piercing gaze. Then Denshichiro once again changes his sword stance, and as soon as he lifts his sword up, then Musashi takes a quick step forward, and boom, straight into it. Go down already. I won, right? Just like that, straight through Denshichiro. Now, there's more to the fight afterward. You guys can always check out the amazing work Vagabond, the manga, but this is just a fantastic way of saying your mindset is all about the win. It doesn't matter how you get there. So instead of thinking, how can I look cool? How can I show this? How can I show that? What matters is, I could probably choke him out. I could break his leg and end it here. I think if I move to the side, I can break his rib and that'll end the fight, because your mindset is working on winning, not the insignificant nonsense of technique, especially at that point. It does not matter. What matters is getting the victory. And just like you said before, what matters is cutting him down. Let's go over his concept of these strikes. So this is what he says. He says, striking an opponent in one count. So take a position within which both you and your opponent may strike each other, and before he is settled on a tactic, and without moving your own body or putting your mind anywhere, strike him quickly and directly. Okay, so essentially he's saying take the initiative. So he's saying that you should go into this battle, and before your opponent or even you has your mind settled on a tactic, you jump the gun. You take the first initiative. Now, this is always important. Being a man in this world, part about masculine wisdom is understanding that you will be far more rewarded for aggression than passivity. If you go through life being like, oh, should I go talk to that girl? No, I'm going to wait till the right opportunity. That passiveness, not only does it destroy your mindset and your own confidence, she's going to notice it. And she'll think to herself like, oh, why didn't he say anything? And just from that one impression, if you try to talk to her later on, there's going to be a bit of diminishing return on it, because you've already showed her that you don't want to be there, that you're scared. Same thing in a fight. It doesn't matter what it is. When you're there, it's better. As soon as you see an opening, you take it and you go for it. And you have to have absolute belief in your skills and your ability to get things done, that you as a man, once again, you don't have to be certain. You don't have to be right, but you do have to be certain. You have to be sure, and you just go for it. Take the initiative. So the second strike you can do is called a double action rhythm. He says, when you advance to strike your opponent and he quickly moves back and then strikes back at you, you want to go ahead and feign your next move by first striking at the point where he has completed his action, and then strike once again at the point of withdrawal. So let's illustrate it, right? You're here. This is the guy. You're going to swipe at him. He's going to move back. He's going to swipe at you, and you're going to move back. So then you're going to swipe at him and then swipe at him again. Okay. So what he's saying is you can go for a double action. And I talked about this on the last chapter. Musashi is fervently against more than one strike coming from your opponent. So either you kill him on your very first strike because you're the first one to move, or if the dude gets one throw in there, you make sure you break him down and you finish it, right? So another, idea of the double action rhythm will be like a double jab. If I'm fighting somebody and then I throw a jab and he moves back and he throws a jab at me, I'm going to throw a jab and then throw a jab again, or throw a jab and throw it across, right, to finish it out. So doing that motion back and forth is you're doubling up on your efforts, because one didn't work, but you change your tactics and you move quickly. You need to escalate the situation. No thought, no concept. So when you think you and your opponent are ready to strike, your body becomes a striking body. Your mind becomes a striking mind, and your hand instantaneously strikes with strength emerging from nothingness and leaving no wake. This is the most important strike. I wanted to put up a video here, but I think it might be an issue with the copyright. But if you guys have seen Enter the Dragon from back in the day with Bruce Lee, so there's a scene toward the beginning of the movie when he's talking to his monk at the monastery before the head Shaolin monk asked him to go fight in the tournament. And he's talking to him, and Bruce Lee's explaining martial arts in his own rhetoric, in his own philosophy. So what he says is, he's like, a good martial artist doesn't become tense, but ready, not thinking, but not dreaming, ready for whatever may come. When my opponent expands, I contract. When he contracts, I expand. And when the time comes, I do not hit, it hits all by itself, right? It's a very famous scene. That's exactly what he's saying here. Right? The idea is that when you realize, with no thought, no concept, when you've studied the way enough and you've practiced what you should be doing, and you see that opening, you actually yourself aren't hitting. The essence of the opening, the essence of your training all hits all at once. And this is a very, very deep concept, which is why he says it's the most important strike, the strike of running water. If you and your opponent are equally matched and you know he's ready to avoid or parry your next strike, let your sword follow your body and quite slowly strike with all the power of momentarily unrestrained water bursting forth from a running stream. So what he's saying is, if you know you and your opponent are button heads and you guys just so happen to seem equally matched, then the one who's going to win is going to be the one guy who says, you know what, I'm going to put everything I have into this strike. Because continuing to trade blows is not going to work. Maybe I've already tried stabbing at his eyes. Maybe I've already tried getting his limbs. If nothing's quite working and we're kind of equally matched, then the guy who's going to win is going to be the guy who can overwhelm the other person and just strike them through. It's called overwhelming force. Okay, so another important topic here. This one is a beautiful strike, actually. This is called a flint and spark hit. So it says, strike with great certainty and strength without raising your sword at all. When your sword is already joined with your opponent's, push strength into your feet, body, and hands, and strike quickly with these three. Okay, so let's break this one down. So what he's saying is, strike with great certainty and strength without raising your sword at all when your sword is already joined with your opponent. So say, for example, your opponent clash swords. The idea is like once you're here, you don't want to do like they do in animes where you hit the sword and then you're moving back into position. Like, why waste the positioning? You're already there. So what matters is once you hit position here, you're already there. It's going to be better for you to, instead of disengaging your blade, keep your blade against his. And maybe now you're going down the blade, striking down his hand and cutting his arm. Maybe you're turning off the blade or you're ramming your shoulder into it, but you're keeping that closeness to it. And the flint and spark means that because you're there, once you move slice across his sword, that flint might make a spark like you would with two blades, right, going across each other. So he's saying that when you guys already have the position, you've gotten that close, don't lose the position. Don't reset yourself like they do in the films. Once you have it there, you have the advantage. You can now control it. So once you've made a clash, now swipe down and cut his hand. Don't waste the moment, right? No wasted movement whatsoever. Don't waste time trying to look cool. You're already there. Take the opportunity. Okay, so it's called like a second step strike. And then he also says, put strength into your feet, body, and hands, and strike quickly with all these three. As in, don't just use your hands. Once you're using the sword, whatever it's going to be, even if it's one in each hand, and you're swiping down after making contact with his blade, you should be stepping into him, closing the distance, right? The idea is your entire body moves all at once. It's never just the sword hand by itself. And we'll talk about more of that later on. Okay, now we're going to go on to the body. So the body taking the place of the sword. As a rule, when you strike at your opponent, you do not strike with both body and sword at the same time. You're like, wait, but I can't just leave my body out. What should I be doing? This is amazing, guys. You use your body first in the strike, causing your sword to then strike regardless of your body. Guys, so this concept is very dear to me. I think as men, we spend too much time trying to contemplate every single advantage we can have going through the world. And oftentimes, you can gain the advantage by, reading this book or researching this or having some friend do this, but nothing ever in life is going to be better than just taking action and going. So what he's saying is, in real life, when you're fighting someone, if you want to have the strongest strike, you're not trying to lead your intentions with the sword. That's a very weak mindset. You're stepping through with your body. And if your body is moving the way it needs to, the sword comes directly after. Okay, a good illustration of this is think of like a baseball swing. The guy has a bat, and he's getting ready to swing the bat. What is he going to do? He's going to lift his lead foot. He's going to step down. He's going to drive his body. He's actually going to be already moving with his body. And then the arms come after the fact. The arms come after the body. And any sort of athletic endeavor, when it comes to throwing or swinging, you will see this motion. This is by far the strongest way to get anything done, which is why we teach it to every single kid who's coming up, and which is why every single professional does it the exact same way. If I'm throwing a football, I'm going to throw a football. I'm going to go ahead and move with what? My body first. And the last thing to get launched off is my arm. The arm is the last thing. It's the whip. It comes after the body. He's saying the same thing. When you're fighting someone, you shouldn't try to swing before your body gets there. You should move to him with your body. And then by you planting your feet and rotating your hips, because you've moved with your intention and your resolve, then the blade will swing through the person, and it will be just an end result or a consequence of your body already moving, right? Your body's already moving toward him, and you just so happen to have a sword in your hands, and that's what cuts. This is amazing, amazing concept. And it applies to every single freaking sport that exists. That's how you know for sure this works. And for him to think about this stuff back in the 1600s and write it down like no one else knew what the hell he was talking about is amazing. Okay, it's amazing. He says, though you may strike with your sword without moving your own body, for the most part, the body strikes first and is followed by the strike of the sword. In other words, there might be a time when maybe you're parrying or something like that, but that's a very, very, very uncommon occurrence. For 8 out of 10 swings, the body should move first. And if you're doing it correctly, you shouldn't have to use all the other nonsense. And that's essentially what he's saying. Okay, the body of the shuko. So this is really important. I think it's called maybe it's called like a timid monkey, I think it was. I saw another translation of the shuko, something like that, or bashful monkey. So he says, when you advance towards your opponent, do not have the least thought of extending your arms, but rather rush in quickly before he strikes. If you think of extending your arms, your body will retract. Thus, be intent on entering quickly and striking with your entire body. So what he's saying here is, if you're going to go towards your opponent and your arms are already extended, when you move closer to him, wouldn't that mean that you have to pull your arms back? So you're wasting energy. Why extend just to pull back to then re-extend? So what he's saying is, if you think of extending your arms, your body will retract. Don't do that. In other words, just enter with your arms retracted. And that's also going to show you your resolve, right? It's one thing to say, I'm going to go ahead and lead with this strong instrument, this sword, and I want to have some kind of barrier in between me and him. So when I rush at him, it'll hit this first, and I can try to make it go through the block. No. He's saying that's a weak mindset. He's saying that's going to get you killed. He's saying that he, who's the greatest to ever live in Japan, a flawless record, says, don't do that. Don't go in with the mindset of using your sword as a barrier. Your sword is part of you. You rush in. Then you don't have to waste time kind of coming back. It's already there. And then when you're ready to strike, then you extend through the person. Okay. He said it is easy to approach with your body at the same time. Sorry, it is easy to approach with your body in the same time it would take for your hand to reach out. In other words, same amount of time it takes you to go like this, you can just step forward and you can be there. So why waste the movement? Now, the biggest impediment to this, obviously, is the person's mentality. If they don't want to be there, if they're scared to death, they won't do it. They won't do it. What he's saying is, you need to be the man who's not looking for a barrier. You're the man who strikes with who you are first, and all your tools come after you to finish the job. But it's the mindset of the man who's willing to step directly into danger, like an absolute raving lunatic. Step into a place that no one wants to go into, the absolute danger zone, that circle around any kind of swordsman that's able to gauge the distance. He's saying, step directly into it, and don't even extend your arms. Act like your sword doesn't even exist. You're stepping into it. You guys might see this if you guys watch animes and stuff. It'd be like a Bato Jutsu, right? The Bato Jutsu, where you're actually, it's the very quick unsheathing of a sword out of its scabbard to accelerate it and give you power. This would be a very good example of that. It's like, instead of me having my sword already out, I'm going to step forward to that dude. So say, for example, Musashi's walking around everyday life. He's not walking around with his swords unsheathed, right? And some dude tries to ambush him, come out of nowhere, because if you can take his head, no one says, oh, was it a sanctioned fight? Do we have rules? They don't care. If you're the guy who killed the legendary Musashi and got his head, you can now take that as your resume and get employed by a daimyo or a shogun and get, land and wealth. So it was a big deal to want to go against this guy. So trust me, his sword was sheathed at all times. And what he learned over time is you want to always have it unsheathed to where you can defend yourself. So you need to learn how to just step into something without even being there. So he's the kind of guy where some dude jumped out of a bush, he's just going to go straight at the guy. No hesitation, pull out his sword, boom, Bato Jutsu, go straight through him, right? That type of resolve. I mean, we're talking about a guy who was, this dude had to be an insanely intense guy, man. I'm serious. I'm fully convinced that from all the accounts that I've heard with Musashi in terms of his demeanor, the rank and terrible smell he had at all times because he wouldn't wash his clothing because he was worried about being vulnerable. He wouldn't wash his body. His hair was oftentimes unkept. This guy was like a walking middle finger, right? He would stand out in any crowd. He'd have a look on his face. He'd be very, very dirty, extremely pungent scent. We're talking like flamboyant, right? It'd be equivalent to a guy dressing up and peacocking, but he peacocked with his strength and with the smell of his clothing when he went out anywhere. And so this is a dude who was ready on site. And that's what he's trying to teach you guys to do. If you never let your mind slack, you never have to all of a sudden get into the mindset of having to fight. You're already there. You're just that guy. There is no change. You're just already that dude. And so what he's saying is, if you're already that guy, then when someone comes at you, you're already ready. So instead of saying, I'm going to get my sword out and defend myself, no, you're like, oh, cool. You're here. Boom. It's over. It's like in that movie, The Watchmen, when Rorschach goes to prison And the guy tries to fight him. And he's like beating up a dude or whatever in prison. And he's like, you guys might think that I'm stuck in here with you, but you're all stuck in here with me, right? Which is a crazy hard verse. But it's the same thing. Musashi is like, you guys are in my world. So if you come toward me, you guys are stuck here with me. And I'm going to step to you. And you're not going to like it. And that's what he did. And we're talking about the greatest under the sun, guys. The invincible samurai. All right, the body of lacquer and glue. So he says, when you come close to the body of your opponent, stick to it without separating. And with strength, head, body, and feet. As in when you get close to somebody, don't just get close to him for getting close to him. And don't just lead with your head or your feet. Make sure your entire body is there, right? He says often people will close in with their head or feet, but will leave the rest of the body. Don't do that. So that's a weak mindset. You're relying on a half emotion. You're like, maybe I want to kind of get close. So you're like shoulder ram somebody, keep your feet out because you want to be able to make a retreat. No, he's saying if you step close to somebody, make sure your head, body, and feet are close to them at all times. You're there because you want to be there. Keep pressed to your opponent without letting even a small space in between. As in, once again, you're trapped in here with me. If you guys leave a space open for me to step in and get inside your guard, it's over for you. And I will stand there and I'm going to destroy you because I want to be here. This is where I thrive, right? The mentality, guys, the mentality that he's showing you is no matter what endeavor came on in life, it doesn't matter if it was surprising or not, he was always ready to be there. He never wanted an escape. Okay, I see this in the gym all the time. Guys will be doing a tough workout, especially in CrossFit. Do a workout, and I know what it's like. I mean, I've done it multiple times. So when the workout is extremely intense and extremely, taxing, you're exhausted, and you want to kind of look away from the bar and look up at the clock, and your mind is thinking, I don't want to do this. So I have to do all 5 rounds. No one's going to watch me. Those are all minds for escape. And what he's saying is when you're going to be there, be there. So the best CrossFitters are like, cool, 5 rounds left. The barbell is going to hate me. People are going to hate having to compete against me because I'm going to crush this thing. I want to be here. And that's the difference in his mentality. He wants to be here. He's not looking for a way out. Okay. And that's when it comes to moving, once again, in life or death scenarios, especially when you guys, if you guys watched the last one, Musashi did go against anywhere between 60 to 70 of the actual Yoshioka clan and had to fight off those people. That's where he learned his legendary Denshichiro out of necessity. Trust me, when you're fighting 70 dudes who also have swords, who are also practicing dojo guys, like we're not talking about like newbies who are just like out in the street. No, these are actual like disciples. These are actual seniors of the Yoshioka school or even students. And he fought them all by himself and still killed their head dude. He wanted to be there. That mentality is what kept him safe. It's almost like, safety is in the eye of the storm. That's literally what it comes down to. All right. So another part here about posture and appearance. This is very, very important. He throws it in here as just another way to reconfirm what he was saying. Avoid contracting your body in any way whenever you have closed in on an opponent. You're like, what do you mean by contracting my body? He says, close in with strength, extending your legs, waist, and neck, and you align your face with that of your opponent. In measuring yourself up to your opponent, be intent on exceeding him. You will then gain in height and rush in with strength. Okay, so let me break this thing down. So what he's saying is, even when you move towards somebody, you need to appear like you're dominating, right? We talked about it before. Your dominant posture is going to be here. Chin slightly up, shoulders back, chest up. He's saying even when you close in and you get next to that dude, you shouldn't be crouched down. You're not protecting anything. You get close to him, you align your face to his, and you're here, right? And think about that concept, guys. I've gotten into a few street fights. If I ever fought a dude who got that close, who could actually harm me, and he was just towering over me like this, like some kind of like, Dragon Ball Z moment of like, facing Cell, and you're like, oh no, I'm going to die. Like that's extremely, I can imagine how that'd be extremely alarming. You're like, dude, this dude's freaking here. So what he's saying is you never play small in anything in your life. He doesn't care what it is. Once again, the way that you move yourself in martial arts should also be your everyday body, your everyday stance. So he says, even when you close in on somebody, you still align your face with his. You extend your legs as in you stand up tall. You extend your waist as in your waist is straight. You extend your neck as in you're up here, and you align your face with his, right? So in other words, when he gets in close, he's still staring you down. Like what? Looking down at you like this, like I'm going to destroy you. That is crazy. That is crazy. When I read this for the first time years ago, I was, wow. I'm like, is that what I should be doing? But I never see that in fights. But then you think to yourself, wait, a lot of this, the best fighters out there actually do it as well. And think about those different advantages. Here, I'll apply to different things. Let's say you're doing wrestling. When you control someone's head and someone's neck, you control where their body goes. If someone's here, then guess what? oftentimes they're difficult to control and they're trying to control you. So the guy who can keep his head up and maintain posture is the stronger opponent. Let's assume you're doing Muay Thai and you get into a clinch. When I have a clinch, I'm trying to pull the other guy's head down. But if I'm pulling it down, he's this way here, that means he's what? He's defending against my guard. He's going to put his hips up against my body to keep me from trying to knee him. And now he has the high position. So even in contests like that, you get the immediate advantage. It's the advantage for everything, is to always be upright. So what I'm saying, guys, and I can't drive this point home any more clearly, everything you do when you go through life, keep your chin up at all times. Anytime you straighten up, never look down, always keep here. This is the strongest way to hold yourself in the world. And it's also the way that you yourself recognize what true strength is. Okay. So of all the concepts in this one, I want this one to hit home the most. This is the most applicable to anything in life. If you're not fighting someone, this right here is always when you're at your strongest. And so he's saying, even when you're trying to kill somebody with a sword, this is your strongest. Even when you're doing Muay Thai, it's your strongest. Even when you're wrestling, trying to get your head up and have a good position and control his head and put his head down below yours, that makes you the stronger fighter at all times. So once again, like he says, in measuring yourself up to your opponent, in measuring yourself up, be intent on exceeding him, as in always look like you're towering on him. I mean, I don't think Musashi was a tall dude, and he's still making it work. Okay. Once again, he says, you will then gain in height and rush in with strength. So I love that. It's absolute dominance. That's a beautiful statement there. Okay. So applying the glue. When you and your opponent strike together and he has checked your blow, continue to apply your sword to his as if you were applying glue and close in. Stickiness is strong and entanglement is weak. You should make a distinction between the two. So what he's saying here is, when you and your opponent, when your swords strike to each other, continue applying pressure to a sword and you push him back. As in, dude, once again, when I came with my strike, I'm not hitting you and I'm not going back. I'm not doing the anime thing where I go ching, 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 and I'm sliding this. No. Why would you give up position? If I clank into your sword and you're not strong enough to drive me away and I somehow get closer to you, I am now your worst nightmare. I'm staying stuck to you and I will never let you go. As in, I know I'm going to be here. And if I continue closing in, guarantee you, it's going to put you on your heels. And that gains the advantage. So that's really, really big when it comes to samurai and just sword fighting culture. Anytime you're able to close the distance, let's say, for example, a guy does a strike and you have the kodachi or the katana as well as the wakizashi. And a guy goes to strike and you go here and you're able to just block with like an X block. Doesn't matter. Once that happens, you don't just swipe it away and say, ha. No, you hold here and you ram it into that dude. Okay. Anytime you block a hit, you ram into him. You get close. You stop the motions. You make him contract his arms by you getting closer to him, moving your body, using your body, shoulder ramming, whatever it is. But once that happens, he's now in hell. That's where you got to see it. If you let me in the circle, I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to get inside your guard and I'm there. Do not give up the position. Okay. And same thing with anything in life, guys. Like once you have an advantage or something, you've made leeway. Don't pull back on it now. Right. I always see it like in business. Is, if I'm making some headway on a particular skill in business, I'm going to say, wow, that really worked. I got a lot of clients and I sold a lot of sales. This one, oh, let me try this new one. No. If it's working, double down, triple down, quadruple down until there's nothing you can squeeze out of that thing. And then you change tactics. Right. Same thing here. That's what he's telling you guys. Double down, triple down, get into it 100%. Do not change the tactic. You're already there and finish it. And once again, stickiness, like what he's saying, is different than entangled. Entangled is like, oh, I'm stuck. I can't get out. Stickiness is, this is where I want to be. You're mine. Okay. Big difference. And in doing that, you guys are essentially disarming him because now you took away his sword. And with Musashi fighting with two in separate hands, if he's able to slice here and then take away the sword by ramming into, this other one is free. Boom. There's actually, I should have put that in here. There's a manga panel from that same fight with Denshichiro and Musashi to where he does swipe down and he cuts through his arm. So as soon as that happens, Musashi got his right hand with one hand, swipes through, chops off Denshichiro's wrist. Boom. As soon as that happens, Denshichiro uses the arm where his wrist was cut off, grabs the back of Musashi and holds him tight because now Musashi came in close. And once he has it there, Denshichiro has his sword up in his hand. And everyone's like, his disciples like, yes, he's going to do it. Denshichiro thinks to himself like, yep, I sacrificed my hand. I'm going to kill you now. Before he's able to strike, what happened? The dude's guts fall over the floor. Why? Because after Musashi did this, he knew he was close. He pulled out his wakizashi at the same time and sliced across. So as he was holding him in tight, Musashi was like, cool, I'll take all your liver. I'll take your spleen. I'll take it all out, and just falls out his body. Why? Because Musashi's mind didn't stop there. And once he got in close, he was like, you're in my realm. I'm not in yours. And then Denshichiro thought it was the other way around. He thought, oh, cool, got my hand. I'm going to grab you. I'm going to get you. I'm going to finish you. And it's like, nope, because Musashi's mind kept going. And that's why Musashi's like, did I win already? Is this over? And it's an absolute G moment. So yeah, read the manga, guys. Okay, stabbing. So this is a less used tactic, but very, very useful. Now, it says stabbing the face. It is essential that you constantly intend on stabbing his face with the tip of your sword. If you keep your mind on stabbing your opponent's face, he will pull his face and body back. This will give you various advantages for victory. So I consider this like a blinding technique. So when you guys are facing someone with swords here, oftentimes I'm holding the sword like he would do, he would have it down on the floor. But every now and again, it's good to just continue moving it and just distract the person by having it from their eyes. Guys who are holding a katana with both hands, oftentimes will hold it straight out in front because you still have to move toward the person to strike them. And a lot of times they can just do this kind of motion and really disorient you where you're like, oh, I can't find any way to get in. So there's a lot of value to doing that. With Musashi's way, I'm sure slashing at the eyes and stabbing at the eyes was a little bit easier. A good martial arts translation of this is Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee would say, when you're doing Jeet Kune Do, he would always say that your lead hand should be moving at all times, almost like a cobra's head, right? As in your rear hand is going to be stuck to your face here. It's going to be ready for blocking. But this hand here is always moving, always deceptive. You never let your opponent know where the hand's going to come from. It's going to come from low to high. It's going to come from the side to straight. It's going to come from straight to straight. Like, where's it going to come from? And keeping it moving, dancing, and picking at the face and moving around is a way to disorient the person, right? And Bruce Lee's famed number one tool was always the finger jab. You're not clenching for a fist, so that's going to be a little bit slower. He's going to be less likely to block it because from here, you can probably kind of block it with, all right, but if it's here, it might be able to slide through. So we do a finger jab. Take out your eyes. All right, so this kind of stabbing technique was something that every martial artist essentially used, and there was tremendous value in trying to blind your opponent at all times. Okay. Then he also says stabbing the heart. So in the midst of a fight, when you're obstructed both above and at the side and are completely unable to slash your opponent and you can't go this way, then you stab him. Pretty self-explanatory, right? It says the instant you are aware of having evaded his striking sword, expose the ridge of your sword directly at your opponent, draw back so that the tip does not waver, and stab him in the chest. So what he's saying is sometimes the straightforward approach is what you need. Sometimes you don't need the slash. You won't get in close for this and that. And sometimes it's just like, oh, you're done. It's over. That's more of a technique you would also use for like, against like Shishido Baiken, right? When he was using the chain and sickle. Oftentimes you have the chain and sickle. If you're throwing the chain around with the weight at the end, if you're able to get it around or wrap it around the opponent's sword, for the guy who is holding the chain and sickle, what he's going to try to do is try to wrap or pull on that chain to disarm the samurai and get the sword to leave his hands. What the samurai has to do in defense is as soon as he gets the sword captured, what he needs to do is he needs to then bum rush forward, tilt his sword toward the guy and try to do a direct attack. And by doing that, that's going to be his best way of having like a defense by offense, right? So these are less used attacks, especially stabbing the heart, but it's 100% to where, hey, if nothing else is working, let's get straight to the heart. Okay, so let's finish things off. The last concept is his principles. Let's talk about the big one here, encountering many opponents. So when you are alone and engaged against a large number of men, unsheath both long and short sword, open left and right arms broadly, and take a stance with your swords tilted laterally. Okay, this is important. He's telling you guys actually how you should be looking. So if it's one versus many, 1v3, 4, 5, or in his case, against Yoshioka, literally 1v60, which is a crazy concept. These are all guys who were trained with swords, guys, trying to kill him. And he's like, I got it. I'll take care of it, right? So his Nitennichi Ryu is take out both swords, hold them at your sides, one facing opposite directions. Even when your opponents come at you from all directions, be of a mind to drive them into one place. Okay? When your opponent attacks, see clearly who is in front of you and who is behind you. So how can you do that? So let's talk about bit by bit. So drive all your opponents into one place. Why? Because if they continue to surround you, you'll always be at a disadvantage in some sort of way. Now, guys, when it comes to group fighting, I talked about this last time, there's always going to be one person who charges in first. Guys know instinctually. We all do. Like if you guys have ever been in a fight before, you're never going to get hit by all the guys at the exact same time. It's usually one fist after another, or if one guy throws a fist, the other guy throws a kick. It's just a way we all think to ourselves, I don't want to hit the other person or hit my dude or have our fist hit or whatever our feet hit. So we do opposites, right? You guys will see it. Somebody gets jumped on the ground, some dude punches them, and then gets them down to the other dude's going to start kicking them, right? Like this never two. No two guys are really punching unless they're taking turns. Because of that, that's just a natural way that human beings organize themselves. Imagine what it must be for swords, right? It's going to be even crazier, right? So if guys are doing that with swords, they're really not going to be just hacking, slashing away. One guy at a time is like, hey, well, I'll let you go first and I'll try to go afterward and see if I can pick at whatever spot you might be missing. So use it to your advantage. Because of that, he's able to attack the strongest opponent first and try to somehow position himself to where he can get them all lined up or pushed into a group. That's absolutely mandatory, okay? And he says when your opponent's attack, see clearly who is in front of you and who is behind you. Well, you do that because you're focusing on one spot. And if you're focusing on that guy and you're keeping your head at a swivel, your peripheral can cover the vast majority of your view. Now, mind you guys, these are words coming from a guy who literally fought over 60 dudes to kill one guy who was the third head of the Yoshioka clan after he killed Denshichiro, okay? This is real. This is what a real guy did back in the day. And right here, this is a manga panel from Takehiko. This is when he was fighting against the guys, and he says, you know, one thing's for sure, I just cut down your leader. Do you choose to go on, or do I have to cut down all 70 of you? So, badass manga panel. Absolutely badass. He says, quickly engage the man advancing in front of you, but watch peripherally and understand the positions of your opponents. As in, yeah, guys are going to come one at a time because they're not trying to kill each other with their swords. So for that case, you have the advantage. Quickly engage that guy and go toward him before he comes toward you. He says, handle the sword with your right hand and the sword in your left hand at one time, but independently. So what does that mean? You're not doing this, but you might be doing this, or you might be doing this, or you might be doing this, right? So it's using them as a way to block, parry, strike, block, parry, strike. Bruce Lee did this. Actually, he imitated this. And this was, you know, a concept for a long time. People would say, oh, this is Bruce Lee's way of fighting. No, it's not. So what he did was he got that from Musashi. So in Enter the Dragon, when he's going against Han at the end, he's punching him. He's doing the back fist punch, back fist punch, back fist punch. And then when the guy goes to strike, he's also slapping away his block and then punch. Slap away his block and punch. So that idea of the boom, 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 that was created by this man here back in the 1600s. So that's what he used to do with guys. Kill him once. Everyone else had two hands on one sword. He had the advantage. As soon as you strike with one sword, he's going to go here and then leave your whole body open. Boom. Because as soon as you strike with the sword you missed, you're open, right? And mind you, this must have been scary for those guys. Even Musashi says he invented this style during that fight out of necessity and then realized, oh, I'm going to be the strongest in the world because I just did this. No one's ever done it before. So even he thought of it essentially on the cuff, which means the guys he was fighting against had no idea what he was doing. They were like, what the hell? Whatever, go for it. And I think during that time too, it was a historical fact that a lot of guys never learned to swing with one hand because they felt that you would never have bone cutting power. It's not enough to actually kill someone. It'd be more of a slash as opposed to a cut, right? You're slashing at the guy as opposed to cutting through him. Musashi showed them that is incorrect. You can actually cut through somebody with good technique, holding it using the fingers here and moving through with your body was plenty enough. And he did it. He says, it is not good to hesitate. Absolutely not. When you're fighting one against many, no time to hesitate. You just got to go. You just absolutely have to go for it. When opponents come forth, cut into them vigorously and put them into disorder. Then immediately charge to where other opponents advance and rote them as well. Okay, so what he's saying is when you get a guy who comes through, don't just say, cool, I'm just going to block and get him out the way, block and get him out the way like you see in movies. He's like, no, you cut through him. You put him into disorder. Why? Because you maim that dude or you vigorously cut through him. You put him down. And what that's going to do is as soon as you put him down, you immediately go to the next one. Because the thinking is this. One guy comes toward me. Boom, I hit him. I strike him down. Okay, everyone back up, back up, back up. You try to regain position going backwards. When you do that, everyone's like, oh, we have the advantage. We're the ones who are pursuing him. We're now the aggressors. He doesn't want to be here. But if you surrounded by guys, you get the first dude down, and then from there, you immediately rush to the second guy, then rush to the next one, rush to the next one. They're thinking to themselves like, I don't want to be next. And so what he's saying is he's like, then immediately charge to where other opponents advance, and you rote them as well. And rote is like another word for like make them like retreat or run away, right? So you're being aggressive and going toward them is how you crush them, right? It's not like in the movies where you're standing in the circle and the guys hit you and you dispatch them one by one, you stay in your circle. No, he's like, break the circle, push them into groups, have them move, but then you attack the guys. You go after them like they're stuck there with you, not like they're trapping you, almost like, hey, guess what, guys? You're trapped in here with me, and I'm going to take all your heads right now, okay? It's an absolute badass mindset. He says, above all, be intent on driving your opponents into one direction like a school of fish, right? Because you got to get them clustered. Right? He says, when you see that they are falling over each other, which I'm sure would happen, you're going backwards, the ground's probably slipping a little bit muddy, right? This is outside, you're wearing sandals and socks. And as the guys are kind of getting scared and moving and going backwards, you'll notice that they're falling over each other. And he says, you should wade into them vigorously and without any pause. So when they start moving back, you continue chasing them down, right? He's showing you guys how to be a freaking Wolverine or a honey badger. He's like, when you're surrounded by people, you take the fight to them and you keep going, and you keep pushing into them vigorously and without pause. He says, if you do not chase in directly toward the place where your opponents have gathered, you will make no progress, because he knows if he doesn't keep charging forward and he somehow relaxes and steps back, what are they going to do? Spread out. They're going to go right back in a circle and you lose all your progress, right? He says, and if you start thinking about the direction from which your opponents will come, your mind will be waiting and you'll still make no progress, right? So once again, guys, this is information coming from a guy who literally did this in real life and was able to kill the third head of the Yoshioka clan while being surrounded by anywhere between 60 to 70 of the actual Yoshioka clan students, okay? It's a guy who lived it. So the principle of exchanging blows. He says, understanding victory in terms of the martial arts and the sword is not done by writing it down in detail. It must be put into practice in order for you to know victory. It is the sword that manifests the way of the martial arts, and I like to add, and not the pen. Okay. So in other words, don't just say, oh, cool, I'm learning martial arts because I'm writing this stuff down. I'm learning how to be confident because I'm writing it down. No. You're not going to learn how to walk the way by using your pen, by writing down stuff in detail. You need to go live it. You need to live your life, okay? Research is just procrastination in disguise. You need to go do it. And you'll never learn it unless you go and do it. And that's why he says it is the sword that manifests the way of the martial arts, as in you have to do it. And in doing it, then you learn martial arts. You don't learn it by trying to study and trying to read about it. Now, the concept of one strike. You should be intent on winning all of your battles with only one strike. Let me say that again. You should be intent on winning all of your battles with only one strike. If you train yourself thoroughly in this, the way will develop in accordance with your mind, and your mind will take the victory on its own. You should practice this thoroughly. So, guys, he says this in a very, very simple way, but what he's trying to tell you to do is you need to imagine that every fight you go into, that you're able to kill the man in one strike. No wasted movement. One thing that Bruce Lee would talk about oftentimes, he would preach, he would say, these martial arts competitions, it's always like this movement and that, and 3 blocks, and then you do this move here, and then do 10 hits, and then go this. It's like, that's all nonsense. It's all wasted movement. You should think of striking, only taking enough strikes to put him down, nothing extra. And what Musashi is saying is when you have a blade, your intention should be, I finish him in one strike. And why would that be necessary? Why would it be so important that he doesn't let anyone else get any more strikes, or he can just crush them in one strike? Maybe because he's surrounded by 60 dudes. You think he has time to give multiple hits? No, one and done. So out of necessity, he realized, hey, you can absolutely take down guys with one strike. So you should do it. And since that is possible, it's better to go into a battle thinking it's only going to take me one strike to put you down. But if it takes another one, I'll keep on moving. But the intention is that you finish the thing with full resolve. Otherwise, if you think to yourself, this should be a competition, and I'm going to go into this fight thinking we're going to trade blows for a while. It's not like a normal sanctioned fight, right? When I'm going to a boxing match, I'm like, oh, I just got to go 12 rounds with this guy. Imagine it's real life. You're not going for rounds. Your idea is, I need to get this dude take him out quickly, because his homies might be coming behind me to jump me. I might be in a place to where I'm restricted with my movement. I might have a part of my body that's already hurt. I'm not really feeling that good. And the more that I punch into this guy, the greater chance I have of getting injured. I also know that the longer the fight rolls on, the greater chance I have of getting taken down to the floor where I can really get injured. So you think to yourself, it needs to be done quickly. But that type of resolve is a very masculine thing to do. We should always be trying to move through things quickly. Fortune favors the bold, right? It favors the aggressive, right? And just same thing with money. Money loves speed. So get it done quickly. Okay, so he says, keep what is in this book line by line. Engage your opponents, and gradually you will grasp the principles of the way. So hear what he said. Keep what is in this book line by line and engage your opponents, as in you have to do it. You have to start fighting people, and gradually you'll grasp these principles. Keep this unceasingly in mind, but do not be hurried. Try your hand from time to time and learn the heart of each step. Okay? You shouldn't rush the process. But at the same time, you have to try your hand at it. You have to put it into practice. He keeps doubling down on it. And no matter whom you fight, know his mind. He says, understanding that this is the duty of a warrior, put these practices into action. Surpass today what you were yesterday. Go beyond those of poor skill tomorrow and exceed those who are skillful or even more skillful later on. As in, once you do it, you have to start defeating these foes, start conquering these people, putting these things into practice and showing yourself that you're capable of actually getting this stuff done. Because confidence is built off of results, not about the imagination. Imagination is more like, okay, I believe in myself, but actual confidence is like, I've done this before. The only way to reach that point is you have to do it before. So he's telling you, make sure you do it. And when you practice it, you'll be better than you were yesterday. And if you're better than you were yesterday, at some point, you'll be better than other people tomorrow. And then even at that point, you'll get even better than the best. Same thing for any endeavor in life. You're always moving toward it. He finishes by saying, grasp the way of the martial arts with the strength of your knowledge of swordsmanship for many opponents or only one. So once again, these principles aren't just 1v1. It's you against the entire world. And for that reason, if you knew you were going to a fight with everybody, you'd probably straighten up your stance. You'd probably be even more alert because you have to watch everything around you. Keep that same mindset as you walk through life, as you ferry across when you're going through anything in life. It's always you and the entire environment. That in itself will make you stronger, because oftentimes when you guys are out there in the real world, you're not just protecting yourselves, which you can generally do. You might have a wife and kid you're taking care of. Older parents who aren't very mobile, or other people you have to protect in the area. Well, if you're not cognizant, if you're not there and you're lazy, bad things will happen. And as a man, it's your responsibility to keep that from happening. That's what we do in society. And his last line, which is absolutely amazing. See to it that you temper yourself with 1,000 days of practice and refine yourself with 10,000 days of training. Guys, this is huge. So what's he doing? He's bringing a distinction between practice and training. He's saying that practice is you doing stuff on your own, but training is actually doing the thing against opponents, putting yourself out there in the real world and actually trying your hand at real life stuff. Don't be the book nerd who's in the back who practices all day long and expects to be good at something. You have to try your hand in real life. So what he did, he put a distinction. 1,000 days of practice is just enough as 10,000 days of training. The training is what matters. Only 1,000 spent with practice, but give me 10,000 in real life. And that's how you comport yourselves. So it's been a pleasure communing with you guys again. This was book number 2, Book of Water. So we have the book number 3, which is the Book of Fire, coming next week. Hope you guys tune in. If you got any questions, of course, put some comments here in the comment section. I'll also make sure I have a link inside the comment section for the very first video. Until then, catch you on the next one.